Open up the door, it's Dave!
Who?
Dave! D-A-V-E!
Dave?
Right, man, Dave.
Dave's not here.
I'm going to call this Car Story Time with Dave. So the story goes that many years ago, like, in the early days of cars, you could think about it in the mid-20th century, when cars were coming into their prominence and everyone had a car, and we were getting into the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. All of these cars were truly mechanical in nature, and anyone could fix them. You could work in your garage, you could fix most things about the car, you could take it to any mechanic and they could fix the car itself, because the mechanical nature of it, if you knew what you were doing, you could fix the car. It was very simple components. You could buy the components from some place, you could repair them. By the time we started to get into the 80s and into the early 90s, you started to see computer systems. Yeah, they were rudimentary, but they were systems that were collecting information about the car. And then that was being fed to a central location in the car. And you could get a scan code, basically a number that would tell you what was going on. So as the oxygen sensors started to go in, you had these fuel injectors that were computer controlled in some way. All of these things would send a code back to say there was something wrong with them. And the problem was, or I guess the opportunity was, that the car manufacturers themselves saw the opportunity to corner the market on car repairs. So if you didn't know what was wrong with your car, you couldn't tell what was wrong other than, say, maybe the brakes or something that was mechanical in the engine itself. You would have to take it somewhere and they'd have to scan it, tell you what's wrong with it, and then repair it. And to get some of the components was kind of hard. So it was a bit of a challenge. And there was a legal challenge that came up, and essentially what they said was, we want to allow the consumer the right to repair. And they can go out and they can figure out what's wrong with their car and get that code and decode it and figure out what's going on. And it was especially big for these independent mechanics who could then take that data and use it in some way to repair the cars. So the law came into effect where people could actually have this right to repair their cars and take that data and use it in some way. So you could actually take it somewhere, or if you wanted to, you could buy the scan tool yourself, plug it in, get the information about your car, and understand what was going on. So it was a really big step forward for us as consumers that we had the right to repair our own cars and do some things with them. Now, here's where things get interesting. As we move into the later 21st century where we are now, cars are becoming more and more technological in nature. As we've talked about before, these car companies are writing their own software, which is kind of silly because car companies do not know generally how to write software, but they're trying it anyway. Now, a car like a Tesla, you know what you're getting into. You know that it's a software company that's really creating a car rather than the other way around. And when you buy the Tesla, you know that a lot of your data, what you do when you drive the car, your driving habits, how fast you drive, what the computer is collecting about information around you, is all shared with Tesla as a part of the bigger plan of building better cars and building a network and allowing for autopilot and all of the things that they would normally do. So all of these things become important in some way. So Tesla had it figured out, and I knew that going in when I bought the car, and I think most Tesla owners understand that when they buy the car, that they're sharing their data as part of a larger piece to the puzzle of making better machines and making the whole driving environment better. So kind of nice to know that that's what I was getting into. But what you may not know is that other car companies that are getting into this market, whether they're electric or not, these car companies are figuring out that they can collect the same sort of data that Tesla's collecting, and also, just like Tesla is, wirelessly send that data back to the manufacturer. So different car companies are collecting data about you. Now, what's in that data stream? It's kind of unknown, but it contains your basic diagnostic information about the car itself, plus driving habits, plus acceleration, braking, all of these other things, because they're trying to collect data to build a better network too. The problem is that you don't have a way to get to that data to be able to repair the car. So for the Tesla, I can't just take it to any dealer to have it repaired. Now, for the most part, there's no engine, so I don't have to repair that. And brakes and things like that, I can certainly repair. But if something else went wrong, it's going to produce a code. It's going to tell me something on the screen, but it doesn't really tell me what's wrong. And I have to take it to Tesla or someone who's an authorized repair shop to fix whatever it is. Maybe it's an oxygen sensor or something else. But I have no way of knowing what it is. Other car companies are following suit and doing the same thing, where they're figuring out that they can collect all this data about the consumer, send it back to the manufacturer, and then you'd have to take the car to the dealership in order to decode what's going on there. Massachusetts was the first of many states that enacted a law that's a right to repair law, with what's going on in the current environment with cars that are collecting data. You can't just plug a scan tool into the car because the data is not in the car anymore. It's being sent back wirelessly to somewhere else, just like the Tesla is doing. And it seems like a great idea. I think it's a tremendous win for us as consumers. But the auto manufacturers hate that. They want to drive you to their dealerships in order to do the repairs. That's where they make the most amount of their money. So they want you to go to the dealership and have your car repaired. So that's a bit of a gap. The federal government also stepped in on this deal and said, Massachusetts, we don't like this. There's a very big privacy concern that goes on here. We're sending data wirelessly across to the car manufacturers. If we let you get to that data somehow, you may get to other data, or someone else may be able to break into that, hack into the data basically, and get something about it. Or perhaps more nefariously, someone could hack the other way and hack your car and maybe make it brake incorrectly, or brake at the wrong time, or not brake at all, or whatever. So there could be some gaps in that because there's no privacy protection about this. See my previous note about car manufacturers creating software. There's a gap that there's maybe some security concerns around the data itself and how it's being used. And again, you may not know that your data is being used this way. You may not realize that they're collecting data. So it's kind of a problem, right? And so the federal government is trying to stop Massachusetts from having this right to repair law. And what's happening here is that as consumers, we're looking at it like we may not be able to take our cars to an independent mechanic for bigger issues with the cars anymore. We may have to take it to the dealer, where the dealer is going to basically rip us off, because that's what dealers do, because they're in the business of making money that way. And they're not making as much money from the sale of cars. They have to make it up somewhere. So why not make it up through some of the repairs you have to do? And that's always been the case with dealers. They've always been, not always 100%, but some of them are a little more shady in the way that they do their repairs and the things that they do with the cars. So you have to be concerned about that a little bit. And as consumers, this is kind of a dangerous position to be in, because now we may not be able to take advantage of our cars and be able to repair them ourselves. Now, they last longer, they don't have as many problems, so that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a bad thing that we don't have that ability to control what happens with them anymore. And these independent shops, these little small mom and pop shops that are starting to, you're starting to see some of these older cars that are truly mechanical disappear out of the marketplace. The ones that are in the middle range, where they're starting to go away too, because the cars are starting to wear out. So you're starting to see that these scan tools won't be as valuable anymore to these car repair shops. So the problem becomes these car repair shops may go out of business too, or may have to change their business model, because they may not be able to take that data from the car and do the repair to the car. So it's a gap. And I find it interesting how there's a lot of nuances to this, and the fact that we're collecting data, sending wirelessly, doing different things could be a problem. Maybe it's not. I mean, look, I work in a space related to information security, so I have a sense of how this works. And really, realistically, there is a threat, but the threat may be overstated a little bit. Maybe. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm no absolute expert on this. I happen to have some knowledge in that space. And I think sometimes we overstate things, but probably in a good way, right? The fact that you overstate it and think that it could be a problem may be a positive thing, that you have to actually look at the big picture a little more and consider your alternatives. But anyway, that's sort of my interesting story for today. I just wanted to share with you. It's sort of one of those things that you look at and you go, man, it seems so confusing and it seems so simple, but yet there's so much data changing hands. And what does that data have in it? How are we using it? So we'll see what the future holds for us in cars and the right to repair and what goes on. Stay tuned, because I think there's a lot more that's coming in that space.
What's your point, David?